Welcome to the channel, Dr. JWA, theologist since 1994, Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. The life of Muhammad and the verified revelation structure of the people of the book. Episode 30, the internal split inside the Muslim. The words still come out correctly. The routine still appears intact. The Muslim listener still nods at the expected moments, but something has started separating internally. Not publicly, deep underneath the performance. Viewers in the previous episode, doubt inside the developing Islamic ideological authority structure became morally reframed rather than openly examined. And in this episode, the pressure reaches another threshold. The internal split inside the Muslim. Because once uncertainty becomes emotionally dangerous to reveal, the individual increasingly begins dividing external preservation from unresolved internal tension. And at first, the fracture feels manageable, small, private, temporary. And the Muslim inside the Islamic ideological authority structure learns how to survive the environment externally while carrying unresolved contradiction internally. And this is right throughout the Islamic world. Public certainty, private hesitation, visible conformity, and invisible unrest. And eventually the deeper realization quietly surfaces. The Muslim is beginning to separate into two operating realities. This mechanism becomes extraordinarily powerful psychologically because long-term emotional division slowly restructures itself's identity. The Muslim adherent begins compartmentalizing automatically. One version speaks publicly, and another version of the Muslim keeps examining privately. One version protects belonging in the Islamic ideology, while the other version still feels unresolved pressure beneath the silence. For the Muslim, the strain deepens there. A sermon is repeated, a slogan is affirmed, a phrase is spoken with the group, but internally tension remains unfinished. A slogan is affirmed, a phrase is spoken with the group, but for the Muslim, internal tension remains unfinished. And eventually the one tied to Islamic allegiance structure learns something absolutely exhausting. Performing certainty externally does not remove contradictions internally. And that pattern appears repeatedly throughout Islamic history, especially once loyalty becomes performative. Uncertainty becomes dangerous, belonging becomes conditional, and silence becomes protective. Because once emotional survival requires managed presentation, Muslims often begin splitting public identity from private conscience, gradually and almost invisibly. And the transition rarely feels dramatic initially. Usually it feels necessary, functional, protective. Viewers, the Qur'anic submission structure repeatedly reinforces surrender, obedience, and acceptance of prescribed authority boundaries. If we read Quran 4:65, it says, "But no, by your Lord they will not truly believe until they make you, O Muhammad, judge concerning that over which they dispute among themselves." And that reinforcement matters enormously, because once spiritual legitimacy becomes psychologically fused to visible submission itself, unresolved internal tension increasingly becomes something the Muslim listener feels forced to conceal rather than continue exposing openly. And the environment adapts there too. Smiles become strategic, language becomes rehearsed, questions become internalized, and emotional exhaustion quietly accumulates. And eventually the Muslim inside the Islamic structure begins carrying a burden the collective rarely sees clearly: the fatigue of maintaining two realities simultaneously. And that is not spiritual peace. That is behavioural governance operating through internal fragmentation. The prophetic witness carried among the people of the book applies a radical different pressure. Truth must remain examinable openly all the time. Conscience must not be divided for survival. And spiritual legitimacy must withstand scrutiny without requiring psychological compartmentation, managed identity presentation, or concealed internal conflict to preserve belonging. 1 Corinthians 14:33 of the Christian writings says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace." And that distinction matters enormously now, because verified revelation survives scrutiny without requiring fractured identity, maintenance, performative certainty, emotional concealment, or divided internal existence to preserve allegiance. Yet, for the Muslim, beneath the outward conformity, the unresolved question still remains standing. Does Muhammad's Islamic ideology authority structure truly reflect continuity with the prophetic witness carried among the people of the book? Or has the internal split progressively become another mechanism protecting the expanding submission-based structure from unresolved examination?